Dr. Mitch Greene. Welcome to the Maybe Running Will Help podcast. It's such an honor to have you. You're a sports psychologist, and you also do clinical psychology. You're an author of this amazing book called Courage Over Confidence that I read in a day. I had to email you immediately to be like, I just couldn't stop like flipping pages. So I definitely want to talk about all that. But this is a running podcast. So I want to start by welcoming you and also asking you, like, what is your experience with running?
I'm happy to tell you that, but first, let me thank you, Nikki, for inviting me, and also thank you for reading the book. I've done podcasts before, and the most fun ones are the ones where people have actually read the book and want to dive into some of the concepts and are curious about it. So I'm really appreciative that you're not just here to just talk to me. You're here to kind of discuss what I
Yes.
spent a lot of my time and energy writing about. So thank
Oh,
you.
people are gonna love to learn about this, trust me, so I'm
Well,
really
good.
excited to get into
Well,
that
I hope
conversation
so.
too. Yeah.
I hope so. So my quick running story was I was an athlete of all different sports growing up, but when I got into graduate school and I couldn't get a basketball game, a lacrosse game together too easily, I realized I needed to do something and I just started to run. It was a little bit like, watching Forrest run. I just started running and then started to meet a group of people who were runners. And before you know it, I've done about a dozen marathons. And then
Mm,
I got into triathlon and had a sort of a career, if you will, not really like an amateur career in triathlon, an age group career in triathlon, which culminated with doing an Ironman in Mexico years ago. My wife also does marathons and also did an Ironman. And so more recently, I've been had running as sort of part of my training. I really have enjoyed getting back in the gym and doing some of these sort of hit workouts and high rocks workouts and Spartan workouts that incorporate running, but less of the distance and more of it just being sort of built in as sort of part of the endurance. I've also done a fair amount of adventure races, ones where you carry like a pack on your back with a 50 pounds and you go through the night and you kind of challenge yourself mentally as well as physically to kind of survive it. And so anything like that is up my alley. And now that I mentioned to you, I'm getting a new hip or got a new hip, I'm like dying to get back out there and do it again.
I bet. That's awesome. I mean, is that how this kind of work, came to be? Was your through your own personal experience and having some of the challenges we're gonna talk about today?
Absolutely. I'm no different than anybody else out there who I talk to, any athlete who can get in their head too much at times and isn't sure how to manage it. And so, yes, there are times where I've had my own mind chatter. I tell a story sometimes about my very first triathlon. I left in the middle of the swim. I called for help in the middle of the swim, mostly because my mental game wasn't on point. I was starting to
Mm,
panic. And that was at the time very depressing because I was with a group of friends that went ahead and finished it. On the other hand, it inspired me to understand my own chatter and it inspired me to help other people with chatter. And so, yes, I'm someone who has sort of had to work on myself. And anything I teach an athlete or talk to an athlete, I've probably done it myself with myself to help me get through something. So, for
so
sure.
what ended up happening with that race then?
That was it. So once you call yourself out on the swim and they pull you out, the race is over in a triathlon. That's kind of how it works.
Wow,
So I
okay.
had to sit there and watch my friends, including my wife, finish and kinda had my tail between my legs,
Mm,
but I got out even more determined.
did you?
I mean, I eventually on my way home was, like, trying to figure out when my next race could be and how I needed to work on it. I didn't have a mental game plan,
Yeah,
and I spend half my time talking to my athletes about having a mental game plan, and I didn't have one myself.
right.
So I was physically prepared, but not mentally prepared, and that's what a lot of the athletes are coming to me with, which is they are athletic, they put the work in, they're ready to go, but there's a part of their mind that says, that isn't ready to go, and that's what holds them back.
It's crazy because we work so hard on our physical fitness to be ready for these events, and a lot of the time, what, can make or break a performance is the stuff that's going on in our head, and we don't we go to coaches and all these things, but we don't, necessarily read about our mind or read about or go see somebody about, this, and it can be really debilitating. Yeah, and so I'm
Absolutely, and things are changing, I think, for the better, Nikki. Professional athletes, Olympic athletes are talking more and more about their own struggles with their mental game. I mean, certainly people know about like Michaela Schifrin or Simone Biles or some of the most famous ones, Olympians, but other professional athletes or college athletes are sharing more and more that their mental games, whether it's a mental health type of mental game issue or whether it's more performance related or something that they even struggle with, I mean, that's opening the door for a lot of people to come to realize, okay, maybe I should work on my own mental game as well. It's great help to me working with people. I could point to these athletes and say, even she struggles, even she gets really nervous, even she
Yeah.
throws up before she competes, you know, so
Right, right.
you're not as different as you might.
Yeah, and I think that it's like in the past, before we had these tools that we're gonna talk about, I think it was a lot just like you have to like think positively, go hard or go home, like you're weak if you don't have your like mental game together. And it's kind of refreshing to have read this book and to hear your perspective on those things like mental toughness and how you see it. So it's really cool. I'm excited to talk about it. So you have your practice is Green Psych. You work with I know you work with younger athletes and you work with teams and coaches and things like that. Do you also find yourself getting, not professional athletes, people that maybe like me and you are going out there to run marathons, but
Yeah.
we're not doing it for a career, you know?
Yeah. I work less these days with young athletes as than I do with older athletes. By older, I mean like college and high school, late high school, college, and Olympic and pro levels. But we have a practice here that also works with young athletes as well, like the little ones.
Hmm.
Um, uh, and absolutely, I get people who are playing tennis in their club, club tour of tennis, and they're in their 50s or they're pickleball players, and they take their sports as seriously as anybody. Some of them may have been former athletes when they were young. Some of them discovered this sort of competitive drive much later in life,
Yeah.
and they get in their heads for one reason or another and are coming to see me. So, yes, we're not particular about who we see. It's anybody who considers themselves an athlete and who finds that somehow, some way their mind is getting in their way. Those are the kind of people we work with here.
Yeah, I think the challenge, I think, for people who aren't, say, professional or like the teens or the kids, like you feel like you're almost like not good enough to get help for the mind chatter and some of this stuff.
Yes.
How can you like, what do you have anything to say about that? Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. A woman contacted me recently. I'll give you the example of the 50-something-year-old tennis player
Mhm.
who plays for her sort of the local club scene, and she was saying, "I'm so embarrassed to be calling you."
Right.
I'm like, because she's like, "I'm 50-something years old. I'm just playing with my girlfriends at the club, but I'm like a basket case."
Yeah.
And so my job's to normalize it for her to let her know that she's a long line of basket case. Of course, I'm not calling her a basket case.
No, no, I get it. Yeah.
A long line of people who are coming to see me who seem to say the same exact thing. And at the end of the day, if you're struggling, being willing to be vulnerable and being willing to admit it and getting help. Because at that stage especially, and you know this, Nikki, because this applies to the both of us, like you want to be having a good time out there.
Yeah,
And when it stops
exactly.
having fun, then like you start to really question the point of it. And so she and I were talking on the phone. I was saying, look, I get it. Like, what's the point of playing if you're so miserable and you're constantly beating yourself up? If I can help you in a few meetings, get you to sort of be on top of it and you can enjoy it more, isn't that worth it? And
Yeah.
so, yes, she kind of realizes she has to get past the embarrassment. And I'm about to see her next week, and hopefully we'll be able to help her.
Well, thank you for saying that. That is so nice to hear. Because I feel like we do take it. It's such an important part of our lives, and sometimes it feels like, why are we getting so upset about this? It doesn't really matter, but it does, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, as you know from the book, because sometimes it's almost like not us, so to speak.
Mhm.
We're the ones who just want to go out there, have a good time, be competitive, see if we can get better, improve, embrace a challenge. But then this chatter part of our mind, which we're going to talk about, has a wholly different agenda than what we have. And
Right.
that's what people don't anticipate, understandably, is that there's another force beyond ours that's at play once we get on the court, and no one's taught them how to manage it. That's
Hmm.
nobody's fault. No one's sort of explained to them about the fact that they're not when they show up to the field or the court or the track, they're not alone, so to speak, that they show
Right.
up, and so does their mind chatter, and that my job's
Right.
to teach instead of their chatter feeling like it's on top of them, so to speak, I say, "Here's my little hand display. We wanna get you to feel like you're on top of it, but notice it's still down here. I can't
Right.
get rid of it, but I want you to feel more like you're on top of it so that you can kinda decide how this is gonna go versus your chat."
Okay. First, let's define mind chatter. How do you define it?
Chatter is defined as the conversation we have with ourselves that's full of doubt, second guessing, and negative thinking. Doubt, second guessing, and negative thinking. And typically, when my clients, when I define mind chatter, I have a giant whiteboard in my office. I write it in big letters and I define it. They go, "Oh, that's me." Like, I don't even have to get much
Yeah,
further. And
I have
that's
that.
when I knew this term mind chatter was going to stick. Years ago, I was like, people were walking out of my office kind of like, and coming back for a second session saying, my mind chatter this, my mind chatter that.
Yeah.
I hadn't even finished explaining it to them, but they were already kind of buying into it. And the other big piece about mind chatter is that it doesn't show up randomly. In other words, if you or I maybe went out for an easy run on our neighborhood on a Tuesday and we only had like a 30 minutes between things, and we might just be happy to be out there and running it. There may be no mind chatter. But if a friend of ours showed up to the run or a few friends showed up to the run and they're people who we've been running with for years and we're not sort of sure where they are, where they're running, and they're not sure where we are, all of a sudden we could have a chattery mind about what if I'm not as fast as I used to be with them? And what if they're a little faster than I thought? And what if they're sort of in way better shape than me? And what if their abs are tight and mine are weak? And all of a sudden, in certain situations, and those situations are uncertainty, when there's uncertainty and high stakes.
Wow, yes.
That's a whole conversation in itself. But there's certain conditions that I teach athletes when it's gonna show up. So there's reasons it doesn't show up one weekend, but might show up the next one. It depends on the context in which they're playing or competing.
Oh my god, I bet this happens to you all the time. I literally, like, my mouth was like I'm like, "Oh my god, that's exactly like my mind chatter." Like that you probably say things all the
Yes.
time and people are like, "Yes, that's me."
Yes, people are raising their hands and going, "Yep, yep, yep, yep," which is great, which it means that they get that I get what they're getting.
Yeah.
They get that I get what they're getting, and that's, of course, what bonds us together, and
Mhm.
that's how the healing process sort of can begin.
And so it's interesting because the example that you gave wasn't like a race or, it was just like kind of a normal,
Yeah,
you know, thing that you run into just going to a, training run and being with people that you haven't run with before and stuff like that. So that's actually really helpful because I was thinking about it just in terms of like
yeah.
before a big event, you
Yeah,
know?
I think that's a good thing to pick up on, Nikki, which is high stakes could be defined in all kinds of ways. It could be playing in a big event under the lights, so to speak, but a big event for some athlete could be that training run at the local track with their running group. That could turn out to be a high stakes event. High stakes, by high stakes we mean, well, generally at least we mean I get a list of stakes that I kinda go over with athletes, like what makes this high stake? It's not just that I'm gonna be slower
Hmm.
or they're gonna be faster. It gets to a deeper level when we start talking about chatter, like, I'm not gonna meet expectations. They feel some set of expectations that they have to live up to, whether it was because they last year they used to run this fast or people have heard about them. There's embarrassment could be at stake, like the idea that they're way up there and I'm way the heck back here just doesn't look good, just doesn't feel good. The stakes could be disappointment in themselves or others. For those runners who have coaches, that sometimes plays into it. Their coaches could be their best advocate, but some people fear disappointing their coaches or fear that their coaches are going to drop them if they don't have a good workout or don't meet the splits or the times or the heart rate zones that they're offering. So no, it doesn't have to just be a big deal in the way that we might think of like an event.
Hmm.
It could be a random practice, but for a particular athlete, it could be a whole lot of chatter.
And is that kind of what it looks like when you're working with somebody? Are you defining the stakes? Is that part of the
That is probably one of the most
therapy?
powerful things that I do. We start to go, well, what's at stake at that training run, that Wednesday night training run with your friends? And we start getting a list going. And before I know it, I have on this big whiteboard a list of, let's say, 10 or 12 things that are at stake. And it's like, no wonder you're so scared to go on that run. Look at
Yeah.
everything that seems to be on the line. I would be worried about doing that run if I was worried about him, her, it, that, and my reputation, my identity. I mean, and I say to them, like, and they go, oh my God, I had no idea. I thought it was just like I was just like a little bit worried. I'm like, no, there's like a whole lot that you're trying to protect, that you're scared about, and you're afraid you're going to be exposed. You're going to be like naked in front of everyone as if because everyone's going to see you as sort of not being good enough.
Yeah.
And when they get that, then we begin to really move things along about, of course, how to manage it as well.
Okay, and so and the mind chatter is such a big piece of this, which is what is that what differentiates you from other maybe sports psychologists, is that you really work with the chatter piece? Or what are some of the things
No,
that are
I don't think
different?
it's that as much
Okay.
as it's a good question. I think it's more how I work with the chatter piece, not that I work with the chatter.
You're right. That is the distinction.
I think
Yeah.
every sports psychologist, probably known to man, is having a conversation with their athletes about self-talk,
Yes.
about
Yeah.
what are you saying to yourself?
Yeah.
But what I am different from, as you were saying, is the traditional sort of pop psychology, which is the more positive you are and the more affirming you are with yourself to get away from those negative thoughts, the better you're going to be. The athletes that come see me have already tried that and
Yes.
feel like it makes them feel worse, not better.
Yes. It
They go,
does.
"I've tried the confidence thing. I've tried
Yeah.
to tell myself I'm a beast." And if that lasts for about 5 seconds, and then I feel like the biggest fraud and the biggest wimp. And so trying to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts, in my experience with the people I work with, by the time they get to me, that doesn't work.
It just makes you feel worse, like you
That
failed
makes you feel
again.
worse.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It makes you feel like, "I can't even do this confidence thing right."
Exactly.
And so it's more the approach is more of a what like an acceptance-based approach, a mindful approach where we're making room for doubts instead of going, "Oh my god, we gotta find a way for you to get block those out and get focused on the right stuff." To me, it starts with this idea of why are you having chatter? What are the contexts for having chatter? What is it saying to you? And learning how to sort of normalize it and make room for it in order for them to figure out what to do next. And that approach is I'm not the only one, of course, who approaches it this
Mhm.
way, but that approach tends to be different. And having the term mind chatter, though, as I was alluding to earlier, that is sort of it seems better than negative self-talk because it doesn't have the word negative in it. And people
Yeah.
seem to respond to it. It just seems to hit them the right way when I develop that term. So
Yeah,
that
it's
helps.
helpful to have a label for something that really clicks. It's helpful to be able to name stuff. I totally get that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's an
Yeah.
expression in sports psych, the more you can name it, the better you could tame it. So
Real Oh, I love that.
so
Oh, I'm
that's
so excited.
that's it.
I love that. So I wrote down one of the quotes from the book that was really helpful for me, and it talked about it's a myth that athletes must have self confidence if they're to have any hope of reaching their goals. To me, when I read that, it was so like relieving to have to be like, it's almost like if you can't beat fear, do it scared. Like you don't have to have confidence to go
Oh,
into something.
that's right.
Are there any other myths like that that you feel like you're telling athletes and they're like, "Oh, thank goodness."
Yeah, it reminds me of the myth that sort of I have to believe in myself to do well. And so at the one hand, I get what people mean. I want everyone to believe in themselves. Don't
Mhm.
get me wrong. But like there are times you have to do things more courageously than confidently. And you may not believe in yourself that you could that it's gonna work. Believe in yourself in the sense that it's all gonna work out according to plan. And I think that I try to disabuse people of, like, that they first have to believe in themselves, and then they're gonna be able to accomplish it. Sometimes believing yourself is an outcome
Mhm.
from like, you go through it and you go like, "Oh, now I kinda believe in myself, and now I've got a little bit of confidence." The other myth that I think people often will say to me, like, "I've done the goal setting thing, and I find that it doesn't help." And I have found in those situations, well, this is a little less of a myth than just an educational piece, which is
Mhm.
the goal setting won't work. And I spend a lot of time in my book on goal setting, but it won't work if you haven't first learned how to manage that chattery voice.
Yeah.
So if you go in there with a couple of goals in mind that you want to accomplish in the game or in the run, but you haven't learned to manage that chatter, it's true. Those goals, you'll be like, before you know it, you're going to give
Yeah.
up on your
You've
goals
already given up. Yeah.
because you're like, I'm done. I suck. And so the chatter piece needs to come first, and then people can then focus on goals. That's a little bit less of a myth, but less of a piece that people often confuse.
I love that. No, that's perfect. And the thing with your acceptance of the mind chatter is you avoid this thing, which think, I don't know if it's called double mind chatter or double, do you know what I'm
Double
talking?
whammy.
Yes, the double whammy.
So the double whammy, which people like you smile at when I mention it to them, which is always fun because I want people to smile,
Yeah.
which is the idea that which is the place that people often will come to me and they have mind chatter at the start of the race, and then they have mind chatter about the fact they're having mind chatter.
Right. It's like,
And
ugh.
And this often comes because let's say their training block has been really good and they've nailed their intervals and they've nailed their long runs or their fartleks or what have you. And they're really feeling like they're meeting their paces, but they show up to the race and they start to have that chattery voice. No surprise to me or you now, Nikki, which is they have a voice that says, what if I blow it? What if I don't hit those times again? What if? And then, so they're not prepared for that. But then on top of that, they go, oh my God, I can't believe I'm thinking. I can't believe I'm being so negative. Here I go again. And so they have the chatter, and then they have the chatter about the fact that they're having this chatter again.
Right.
And before you know it, in an endurance event like a marathon where you're supposed to be like conserving energy, they're expending all this energy and the race hasn't even started yet. And
Mhm.
part of that education piece, Nikki, is that people want to expect that they're gonna feel the same way they do before a race, like they did before that big interval session or long run, where they
Yeah.
may have been a little bit nervous because you kinda don't know how that's gonna play out. I could relate. I know some of those long runs, I'm like, you hope it goes well kinda thing, but they don't expect to feel the way they feel before the actual race when they're in they're, in the corrals and sort of all that nervous energy around them, and so, because they don't feel the same, they assume that means there's something wrong.
Right.
"My god, I don't feel like I did because the last one. It must mean that I'm not gonna have a good day.
Yeah.
It must mean that somehow I'm not really as ready to go as I thought I would." And then they have chatter on top of that, that they're having all this negative thoughts. That's kind of the double whammy.
It's relentless. It's just
It's relentless.
it's like you're talking about, like, if you had a great training block, I get that, and you'll be like, "Oh my god, I don't wanna waste this whole, like, amazing training block that I had."
Yeah,
But then if
sure.
you have a bad training block, it's still there because it's like, "Oh, your training block was so bad, you're never gonna" like, it's just relentless. It's
It's an equal opportunity offender, as I say. Yeah. Your last race was a great race,
yeah.
and now your chatter is gonna have you worried about why this one might be disappointing. Your
Yes.
last race was a bad race, and now your chatter is saying, "You better get this stupid thing right, because if you don't get this one right, what's the point of all this training?" It will find a way to offend no matter what. Yes.
It is. That's so true. One of the things I heard you talk about in a previous podcast is I think you started as a clinical psychologist, right? And then you moved to sports psychology. And what was interesting to me is that you were like, it was almost an opening for you to also get people who might not otherwise come to therapy. So do you find often that when you work with athletes that there are underlying other issues going on?
I wouldn't say often, but frequently. I
Okay.
don't wanna give people the impression that the athlete who comes in to me to help them get ready for the marathon must also have some baggage, personal baggage from childhood or other aspects of their life. The answer is yes. Sometimes that, of course, is true, and
Hmm.
sometimes there's reasons beyond chatter, even or folded into their chatter, isn't just their own pressure they're putting on themselves, but it's from something that happened in their past where
Mm,
they feel like they have to now prove themselves to
okay.
so and so who never believed in them and always thought this running thing was such a stupid waste of their time. And so sometimes that gets folded in, and my clinical skills become just as important as my sports psych skills, but sometimes not.
Yeah.
Sometimes people find that the only area where they beat themselves up so much is in sport.
Okay.
Like that and that becomes an interesting conversation as to why here, why now?
Right.
And something that's supposed to be like fun and a hobby and a chance to get away from it all, how come it's turned into such a thing? Could again lead to something where we're talking about more than just sport, but sometimes it's really just their chatter and they kind of haven't realized it that their chatter is sort of at play here and we're more just sort of focusing on just that. So it does depend.
I have a question. I don't know if this is a good question or not, but is mind chatter different than rumination?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think they're cousins.
Okay.
I think they're both a form of fear-based parade of thoughts. I sometimes call chatter like a parade of thoughts. Like, if you
Hmm.
think of a parade, one float after the other, it's like, here comes the doubt. Oh, here comes the second guessing, and followed by the negativity. And so it could feel like rumination. So I tend to not make too strong of a distinction. But I might say to someone, your rumination, you call it rumination, I call it chatter.
Okay.
And usually that covers it because I think they're very similar. Let's put it that way. What is important for me to understand though as a clinical psychologist is if they're rumination, if their chatter, how much of it is going on outside of sport? How much
Mhm.
is it interfering in their relationships, in their work life, in their personal life, in their sleep? And that begins to help me diagnostically maybe see the person as something having other than just a performance anxiety issue, if it's interfering in other aspects of their life, that rumination and those other things. Then I might be thinking more of a clinical diagnosis. The treatment plan might be the same.
Mhm.
I might be focusing with them a little bit, not just on getting ready for the race, but getting ready for bed, getting ready for the party where they struggle with rumination, getting ready for a conversation with somebody. But a lot of it comes back to how do you manage that voice that tries to sabotage your best effort?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. I definitely want to talk about how we work with mind chatter and using some of the techniques from the book, but I had one other question, mental health related. I talk to a lot of like ultra endurance athletes, trail runners, and it seems like a lot of endurance athletes have trauma, and I just wondered what your thought was on, a lot you hear a lot of people saying, like, "Running's my therapy," and that sort of thing, and what your thoughts are on, like, how to be cautious, why we should be cautious about that.
Well, there's actually a great book called Running is My Therapy. I'm blanking on the name of the author, but I happen to write a book review for him.
Mhm.
And your brain actually does change when you run and run consistently. It's not just that you feel different, quoting him. It's
Yeah,
not just that you feel different, it's that you are different. There really is something different going on in your brain. So it really is therapeutic beyond just even endorphin release. And again, if I had it in front of me, I would pull a quote or two and
I'll pull it yeah, I'll make sure
yeah.
we put it in the notes, yeah.
Yeah, we could put it in the notes. I just happen to be blanking on it. He was a former editor of Runner's World
Hmm,
magazine. And so, well, I don't have any percentages handy on how many long distance runners or endurance athletes experience trauma. I certainly could understand why, if you had trauma, why long distance running endurance events could be therapeutic to you
mm,
because you really get to spend a lot of time processing who you are. You get this sort of physical endorphin release and brain changes that take place from it. And you often find a community of like-minded people who are also sort of searching for answers and find the longer they go, the more they're discovering what they're capable of. And so I don't have numbers on the trauma piece of it, Nikki, but I would
yeah,
say it's as therapeutic as going to see a therapist for some.
mm,
This idea that they can get out there and go for that run and feel free and hopefully not too chattery.
mhm,
But it's an interesting question. Maybe we'll try to get that for the show notes about what they're saying the percentage of runners. You might know many of them, but I probably know just as many who would say they don't have trauma and they run for
okay.
other.
Yeah, yeah, it may just be the people that I'm talking to because they all have a story,
Well, the
but
other thing
yeah,
is we all have stories, by the way. So it's trauma with a big T, trauma with a little t, right? A lot of people could tell you they run and trauma is part of it, but not maybe trauma in the way that with big T trauma,
mhm,
but like a small t trauma, like, they knew who they were and they got fired from a job and now they're, discovering these other parts of themselves or a parent who thought they were no good as a parent, but they are trying to discover they're more capable than they thought they were and running allows them to discover that, whether that's a trauma thing or just a life circumstance thing that we're all have to deal with adversity,
mhm.
that's, I guess, debatable, right?
That's interesting because I can see where that would be problematic if it's, maybe one of those more little T traumas and say you got fired from a job and then your identity is in question and then you find your identity through running, and then there's the pressure, right? That then causes the mind chatter,
Potentially, and we
maybe.
should be clear though that not everybody has mind chatter.
Mhm,
Not everybody needs help for it in the way that you and I are talking about it. I mean,
mhm,
there are people who I know, who I've run with and run races with. My wife, for example, who's done Ironman and marathons. So of course she gets nervous like anybody does, but she wouldn't need a book like this. She's by nature not an anxious person and not too chattery.
mhm,
And so she sees the benefit of it, but there are people out there who don't necessarily get so
yeah.
chattery. Yeah.
I mean, it's a good distinction for sure. Now, say, you are somebody who struggles with it and, have certain thoughts, like, what's the first step? Is there anything that we can do aside from going to see you, like a therapist, and, from your book? Like, are there things that we can do on our own to help?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the book for that reason, which is that it's kind of a four-step process, and I include some exercises in the books.
Yep.
So one is obviously beginning to appreciate that there's you're the one who signed up for the race or to follow that training plan of that coach and wanted to spend that money and knew it wasn't gonna be easy, and that to appreciate that your chatter has this other agenda in mind, which is really about protection,
Yeah.
protecting you from getting hurt. Not necessarily physically hurt, although that could be part of it. Hurt in this other way that we've been talking about, like disappointing people, not meeting expectations, not becoming the person you thought you're supposed to be, ruining your identity. So part of the exercises in the book is beginning to kind of get a list together of like why you signed up for the race, if you will, and then what Chatter's agenda is, and getting and the book sort of teaches it that Chatter's agenda again is different than yours. Chatter's agenda has nothing to do with running races.
Mhm.
It has to do with, again, trying to protect you from what you perceive as being a kind of hurt that you're not sure you can deal with, a kind of disappointment that you not. So it starts with discriminating between who you are and why you're signing up
Yeah.
and what Chatter's agenda is. And then I go through in the book, as you know, planning for Chatter to show up,
Yep.
like whether you're running a 5K or doing the training run or running the big race and actually planning for it. And some of the strategies in the book, which maybe you were alluding to, are instead of making yourself wrong for having that chatter, I want you to be like, yep, of course you signed, chatter showed up right on
Right
cue,
on
showed
time.
up
Yeah.
reporting for duty. Yep, it's race time. It's the night before, it's the week before. Very predictably, chatter is going to show up because chatter thinks that you need protection. You don't.
Yeah.
Chatter has you worried about what's gonna happen to you and that how disaster it will be. It won't be that disastrous. But
Yeah.
chatter will try to convince you of that, so part of the recommendation is planning for it so that you're not caught by surprise.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt, but I just get so excited. But the first point that you were talking about, determining what's you and what's the chatter, like that one sentence in the book was huge. Like there's so many things that you just say like one time and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's so helpful." Because like it's helpful to be like, "No, I'm the one who signed up for the race." I don't know why, but I was like, "I'm the
Well
one who signed up for the race," you
well,
know?
Nikki, that's one of the few, techniques I used when I did my Ironman. I had
Mm.
mine chatter getting ready to swim in Mexico in the ocean, starting off that 2.4-mile swim. I had chatter going my chatter said, "What if you freak out? You're the guy who helps everybody else not freak out.
Oh
What
my
if you
gosh,
ever
your
freak
chatter
out?
must be, oh,
What if you
wow.
ever freak out?"
Yeah.
And then it was going, "Wait a second, what if you don't finish the swim?" And by the way, I was a good swimmer, not a great swimmer, not a terrible good middle of the pack swimmer. No reason I shouldn't finish the swim. But in these races, if you don't finish the swim, then your whole day's over.
Yeah.
Like, I would have brought my family there, would have all been for nothing. So my chat is focused on that. It's focused on the chip on my ankle and that people back home can watch me. But part of one of the strategies I using, to your point, is that night before in my hotel room, I was writing down basically, why am I in freaking Mexico, of all places? I don't need to be in Mexico, and what my chatter has to say about it. What's important to me, and why am I there, and what am I doing, and what's important to chatter. So when you picked up on I am not my chatter and you're not your chatter, that for me was one of the most helpful strategies to help me, clear my snow globe, if you will.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm guessing like we're going to talk about the other strategies, but I guess everyone kind of gravitates towards something. Something
Yeah.
probably helps one person more than the other.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
the fun for me is trying to figure out, okay, Nikki, I give you a bunch of options. You might like that one, but somebody else might be like, nah, it doesn't really hit home for me. And how to figure out what might hit home for them. That's the fun.
Well, the other one that I really liked, I think was this, it has to do with the second point that you were saying, is when you were preparing for the chatter. And I don't know if I'm skipping ahead. I think this is part of it, but like almost visualizing giving your chatter something to do.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I think the example in your book, or I made it up, was something like you would give to a child, like a crayon and coloring books or something. For some reason, for me, I was like, that's awesome. I'm like, I'm just going to go tell my chatter to go take its like craft and like go do it over here.
Yes. That happens to be another big popular one. And we kind of I got this from an Olympic skier in Beijing, who she, on her second run of her mogul skiing effort, told me this was her telling us that She let as she and her coach were about to get on the lift going back up for her second run, she said, "Wait," and she let a lift go in front of her. That was for chatter, and that
Oh, nuh-uh.
chatter should take its own lift up. She was creating space for it, and then she and her coach went up, and then when she got to the top, where all the extra skis are and the Gatorades and all that, the backpacks are, she told her chatter, "You wait over there and watch me do what I do."
Yes.
And we thought it was the perfect sassy, and she's sassy, kind of comment, and it really was this idea of giving chatter a job, separating herself from it, and so with my clients, I often will encourage them to think about where could you put chatter? Like, where should she go?
Right.
It's sometimes they give chatter a name. Some people wanna give it a name, like of somebody not a very favorable person in their life who maybe didn't believe in them or has been holding them back, and chatter represents that.
Mhm.
And that could be a lot of fun getting creative about thinking where you're gonna put your chatter. It might sound a little bit corny or kiddish, but I have my adult Olympic athletes going like, "Oh, this is where I found to put chatter," and it helps. Now, it doesn't mean chatter is gonna stay there, because you
Okay.
make a mistake or
Yeah.
you look at your watch and your splits are slower, chatter is gonna start to kind of give you a really hard time about now you're about to blow it. But again, that's part of that preparation. If you're prepared for chatter to look for trouble at the halfway mark of a marathon, you'll know how to respond to it by not expending again too much energy trying to fight with it.
I love that. I love it so much. So what are the other tools we have?
The other one that I like is I like to thank my chatter for sharing. And it's got a bit of sarcasm to it, but it's this idea that this is how I think of it, and I
Yeah.
encourage my athletes to think of it. I think, "I appreciate that you're trying to protect me from a result that could happen a few hours from now." Let's just take it to say it's a marathon. "I appreciate you warning me about what could happen." Sort of like, "Thanks, I appreciate it, but, like, thanks, but no thanks." Like,
Right.
"I appreciate that you're in my corner, but, like, I'm good." Like, and so the benefit of something like that, some people call it welcome to the party, like, "I knew
Mm.
you'd be here." Like, this
Yeah.
idea of like, "Oh, you again?" Like, instead of being like, "Oh my god, it's back," now you're like, "Yep, you again. I knew you'd be here."
Right.
Very predictable. And part of it, again, and particularly for your endurance athletes and your audience, is we wanna spend as little extra energy on sapping our mental game as possible,
Right.
versus an athlete who's going, "Oh my god, it's back," and for the next few miles, you're in a fight with yourself that you're not gonna win. So, thanking it for sharing, making room for it, welcoming it to the party. For some of my athletes, like the idea of saying, "Oh, I'm having the chattery thought that this could not go well," which is really different than going, "This isn't gonna go well," which is what chatter wants you to say. You're going, "Oh, I'm having that chattery thought that this could not go well, that it could be a slower time." This way, it's more of like a hypothesis, like, "Oh, chatter's getting me to think that maybe there's a chance it won't go well," but which is a whole lot better than this idea that you're done, it's not going well. Looking
Yeah.
at chatter sort of as a hypothetical, like, "Oh," that it's throwing out there makes it a little less attached to it. It makes you a little less at its behest, a little less of a victim to it. So
Right.
some people like that one as well.
Yeah, just knowing that it's coming and being prepared for it and saying like this is right on time almost makes it feel like instead of like you did something wrong for it showing up that you did something right. Like this is all part of this is even if you can think about it like that almost like oh this is part of a successful performance the chatter showing up.
Yes, I sometimes give examples like, if you showed up to your K and you were hoping to PR, that's your outcome goal, and you've got all kinds of chatter, but you find out the morning of. I realize this is a ridiculous example, but bear with. You find out the morning of, yes, you're still running in it, but everybody else is now gonna be 8-year-olds, and you're 40 years old. And you're looking to PR. So all of a sudden, you may not have much chatter about winning
Right.
anymore, but you would also tell me this is so not worth it. You'd be like, "This
Mm,
is a complete waste of time. Why am I gonna get out of bed to run with a bunch of 8-year-olds to do a 10K and try to." And I'd say, "Yes, exactly. So I've given you in a place where you wouldn't have chatter, but it's not worth it." The fact that you're having chatter in the 10K against your peer group means you're leaning into life. It means you're actually kinda going for it, and chatter is just part of it. It's part of the competitive experience. As you're suggesting, people sometimes see it as a sign that there's something wrong. I'm
Right.
trying to get people to see, like, if you wanna see how good you can be, chatter is a worthwhile thing to have because it means you're testing yourself, you're leaning into life, getting out of your comfort zone, and from that point of view, yes, I want them to embrace it as a sign that they're actually doing something right, not something wrong.
Yeah, because I was thinking about, like, to avoid chatter, right, you would think that you would kind of go into, like, a you wouldn't challenge yourself, you would do something super easy,
Right.
you would maybe there's a time for that, like, I feel like I went through, like I felt so much pressure that I almost didn't challenge myself anymore, I was like, "I'm just gonna go to finish a race, or I'm gonna, like, do this or that," but there's an advantage to putting yourself in a position where you're scared. So, like, wanted to get your thoughts on, is it more important to do stuff for fun or is it more important to challenge yourself? What do you think about that?
Well, of course, I want it to be both. I want the fun to be in trying to discover how capable you are. I want
Right.
that to be the fun. By fun, sometimes people think, like, I get it. Sometimes not fun to run a marathon or do a really tough endurance event. I wouldn't call it fun,
Yeah.
but the fun is in the exploration, in the curiosity, in the discovery process. So if you could challenge yourself in a way that makes you uncomfortable and you could find the fun in that
Yeah.
versus the critical part of you that makes you worry about how whether you're not good enough, then I
Mhm.
am encouraging people to get out of their comfort zone and find the fun in it. Because most of the time people don't regret it. They might not be happy with their performance overall, but as you know, they might have to lick their wounds and then all of a sudden they're signing up for another race because there's a part of them that isn't satisfied just sitting behind their desk on their computer all day, making food for their kids, being ordinary.
Yeah.
There's a part of everybody that wants to be extraordinary and challenge themselves. And if I could help people find the fun in the challenge of it, then you have a perfect match.
Yeah, and that I also want to talk about what you say about setting goals because I think that's kind of touches on it a little bit when you're setting goals, whether they're results oriented or process
Yeah.
oriented, right? So
Yeah.
you talk about that a little bit. Can
Yeah.
you share can you share a little bit with us about that and how we might look at setting goals?
Yeah. Part of the preparation, the mental preparation, which is kind of the theme of the book and the theme of today, which is how can you be mentally prepared to manage chatter? And then what kind of goals do you have to set for yourself? I break it down into two kinds of goals, the action goals, which are outcome goals. I want to run a 3-hour marathon. I want to run this split. I want to be top 50 in my age group, etc. Those are all results. They're all numbers that you can see. They're factual. Those are great to have before a race. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against having a goal to run a 3-hour marathon if that's your goal.
Mhm.
But that's often not enough for people who are very chattery. They need other, what I call action goals in mind. Action goals are the kind of goals that have to do with the race itself. It could be with strategy, it could be with technique, it could be with managing mind chatter, that are the controllable type goals, the kinds of goals that you can actually execute in the race itself. Running a 3-hour marathon, you cannot directly control whether you run a 3-hour marathon. If you could, anybody who wants to run a 3-hour marathon would just run a 3-hour marathon. We all know that's not quite how it works.
Right.
Just because you have that as a goal, you can't control it. So even the professional runners and the Olympic runners talk about Molly Huddle used to talk about pulling back on her outcome goals. Of course, she was like, somebody who was expected to win every race,
Mhm.
pulling back on that and then focusing on some of these action goals that for my athletes include I asked them, "What would you and your coach tell me your strategy is? What's your pacing?" But most importantly, what I'm interested is what's your mental game plan? How are you gonna manage the chatter at the beginning of the race where it's really crowded and has you running slower splits? How are you gonna manage that mentally? If you start to overcompensate and run super fast splits and you're a mile 4 in the marathon, you could be setting yourself up for a tragic day.
Yeah.
So mentally, how to be patient in those moments, coming up with a key word or a mantra or an anchor word or something like
Hmm.
that. Those are part of the action goals, how you're going to respond. Because, again, if I keep using a marathon, at some point the shit's going to hit the fan.
Yeah.
It could be the first mile, it could be in the 20th mile. Are you mentally ready to manage that? Physically, you may be ready, but if you're not mentally ready, then you're really not ready as far as I'm.
Do you have people do things like you were talking I don't know if you were just talking about it there or I heard it before. Like where if something say in the middle of the race where somebody will do well, you said action about the action goals, but like do something like I don't know, tap their back pocket or something like that to help. Is that like a strategy that
Sometimes,
you've done? Yeah.
yeah, sometimes, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you're referring to the book. I talk about front pocket goals and back pocket goals. Front pocket goals are the action goals, back pocket goals are the outcome goals. But yes, I will have people at certain points have certain things to look forward to that they're gonna do at a certain point in a race. And again, that's the fun for me. It's not a one size fits all. If I was
Yeah.
talking to you, Nikki, we might say, well, what at mile 20 would be a way for you to kind of like, release any of that chatter and get you to refocus on what's important in the moment.
Mm. Okay. Yeah.
And that could be anything from switching a band from one hand to the next. It could be putting your favorite tune on at that point in the race. It could be reminding yourself of a mantra, courage over confidence, which is the title of the book,
Yeah.
right? You're not really supposed to feel uber confident from 20 to 26. I mean, not that I'm against somebody feeling confident. And if they are feeling confident, get out of
Go
the way.
for it.
Those aren't the people who are calling
Get
me.
out of the way. Yeah.
It's more like having the courage in those moments. So I will talk to my athletes a lot about what does courage mean to them? What does courageous mean? It could be like an Aunt Mary who fought through, cancer rehab. It could be their dog. Courage could mean a whole lot of things.
Hmm.
Sometimes at certain points in the race, you want to summon that to help push you through some of those tough miles.
So when you're talking about courage, mental strength, that was one of the questions I actually wanted to ask you. How do you define mental strength personally? Or do you work with athletes for because you want them to define it?
No, I'm happy to define it. I'm happy to hear their definition. It's not like my definition is the right definition. The way I define it is the ability to make room for doubts and chatter
Mm,
when you need to the most.
yeah.
And so remember, people who come in to talk to me have already sort of usually set a goal. Usually it's a big goal. Again, it could be an Olympic goal. I have worked with a lot of people getting ready for the Olympics and for Olympic trials, right? And so for me, the tougher you are, that means the better you are in that moment to manage the chatter, make room for it, and stay focused on the task at hand.
Yeah.
That to me is a tough athlete. And that we see time and time again, whether you're watching the Phillies play or you're watching professional basketball players play. I mean, they're all incredibly talented, but who's going to take that clutch shot at the end of the game is somebody who, in that moment, isn't thinking about the time they missed the last shot or worried about what people are going to say if they miss this one. They're the ones who are willing to kind of get up there and let it rip. And so that's a tough athlete as far as I'm concerned.
I love that. And I want to make sure we're respectful of your time.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, but I think this is such an important conversation because, at least personally, and I think I'm not the only one, we tend to ignore the mental chatter. We don't want to feel it. We don't want to listen to it. We want to focus on the physical stuff and we just want to like ignore it and like not think about it, let alone plan for it. You
I
just kind of
agree.
want to be like, no, I'm not even going to deal with you right now. I'll wait until the event and see what happens.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, I'm
And so
sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go
no,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm really excited that we're having this conversation and so honored that you took the time to talk to us. I think the book is a great start, Courage Over Confidence. If you're just curious, you have, maybe you're just starting to learn about this and want to see if reading the book will help. We find we need more help. Is there somewhere we can go to learn about your practice,
Sure.
how you
I
work with people?
appreciate that. Our practice is greenpsych.com. Green, as you can see on the screen with an E at the end of
Hmm.
green. That's a great place to learn about us, but there's plenty, but if you, and we work with people all over the country, all over the world, but if you're looking for someone in your area, you're having trouble finding someone, contact us. We can sometimes help find local people who do similar work or same work. I train some people, different therapists and people in different communities in different states across the country that are doing this work. So sometimes I can connect you to them. And we work virtually as well. I have an online course that is, I think, a good also introduction.
Okay.
It's me talking, me making the videos, me kind of giving basically a summary of the book and what I think are some of the most important points. And I'll have to ask you, Nikki, at some point. I've thought about maybe doing a book specifically for endurance athletes. And
Yes,
so, maybe that'll be something I could offer down the road.
that would be amazing. I would love that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And
Thank you for having me. This was great. And if ever I can come back, if you ever want to talk more, because I apologize, I do have to run, but I look forward to that conversation.
all right, have a great day.
Thank you. You too.